All right. Is this thing on? All right. Hold on a second. Gonna post this on the website so people can actually find it. And I guess we're rolling here. Put on a little background music while we get this set up. All right. I'm gonna. This YouTube thing took a minute to set up here, so I'm gonna get the word out now because I wasn't sure it wasn't gonna work. All right. So yeah, I was like trying to verify this count for a while, and it just happened. So now I have an actual link I can share with people. I'm live right now. I'm talking to the computer. Please. Bear with me here, people. Link. We're gonna wait a little bit so anyone can join. You might want to be here. What's wrong? Wait. From where? Um, hmm. Yeah, I like don't know Yeah, I know. Trying to figure out what's happening here. I don't know why I can't. Like, it doesn't give me a link to share. Oh, here we go. This is it. Let's hold up. Oh. Shit. All right. I think we're good now. It's good. All right, sweet. All right. Bear with me for a second, everybody. Trying to make sure this is working all right. All right. Seems like we're good now. I'm gonna wait a second to see if anybody finds this. Meantime, play a little Ron Hardy mix here from Music Box. Let's see here. All right. Looks like we're live here. All right, we got 3 people. So yeah, technical difficulties here. I've never done a YouTube live thing before, so let's I'm gonna wait a second to get started officially until a few more people come on here. But yeah, we're doing this virtual book talk right now, and just trying to do what we can from home here during this COVID period when we can't do in-person book fairs. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to do a little book talk type of situation. Learn a little bit more technology. And just see how this goes. And yeah, so we'll start in, I guess, maybe 5 minutes officially. Just need to like get some things going here. But yeah, we got Ron Hardy mix here in the background. For your enjoyment. And at any time, feel free to type in a live chat, comment, or question. Take a look over there periodically and try to answer what I see. But yeah, this Hardy mix is from Music Box 1986. Found on YouTube. It's a good one. Yeah, so rocking my Almighty Insane Book shirt right now. I got this hat here, which is like a Pony League hat from my uncle's and my grandfather's. My grandfather's a coach, and my uncle played in the Oak Park Pony League. So, baseball here. I'll turn this down a little bit. And then I got this Letterman sweater, similar to what some of the social athletic clubs would wear back in the day. So yeah, I'm just gonna get started here. People can join in if they find out, and maybe we'll just get this recorded and save it for future reference. So where to begin? Yeah, so here's a copy of the book, Windy City Leisure, Chicago Social Athletic Clubs, the early 20th century. Coming to you live from the Almighty Insane Books virtual lair. I'm your host, Brandon Johnson, founder and publisher of Almighty Insane Books, and I put this little pamphlet together here, publication pamphlet. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about, the content of the book, this history behind social athletic clubs in Chicago in the 20th century, early 20th century, mostly 1900 to 1930s, the area I'm primarily concerned with. Yeah, this kind of caught my interest while doing research on, Chicago's gangs from 1960s to the 90s or so, latter half of the 20th century. For this book and the last, The Almighty Insane, which basically catalogs some compliment cards from Chicago's gangs, which is a practice that was happening from the 60s, tailed out in the 80s, although there's some examples from the 90s. It's often attributed precursors to these compliment cards attributed to social athletic club dance tickets, and some of Chicago's gangs even started as social athletic clubs of some form, or even just sports teams, softball teams, basketball teams, whatnot. So yeah, kind of like, the general terminology, social athletic clubs got on my radar through that research. So yeah, I just wanted to dig back a little further to see how, what ways the social athletic club culture influenced, Chicago street gangs, and, just learn more about the history behind social athletic clubs and the role they played in Chicago, and the different aspects of that. So yeah, I did some research, read some books, tried to dig into some primary resources. Managed to start gathering some materials. So I have, let's see, I have some cards, original tickets that I started collecting. Which you can see are kind of on the larger side, bigger than your average business card. See if I can find a business card here. So yeah, business card size, and then you got these bigger like tickets, sort of advertising, social activities from these clubs. Some are a little smaller. Let's see, this one's a bit smaller. And then I came across this pamphlet made by Vertex Social and Athletic Club, who were kind of based in Pilsen, Lower West Side, Chicago, and it seemed like they mostly fielded basketball teams. And this pamphlet is kind of celebrating, let's see, one of their basketball teams, 1931. So yeah, this pamphlet was made in 1932 and kind of inspired me, in format and design for this publication, in which I kind of dig into, the history of these clubs, why they were around. You know what? I should probably turn off this music. Just turn it down. So yeah, dug into it and discovered some interesting stuff here. This publication is kind of like hybrid text image type of thing. I wrote an introduction. Tried to give kind of a general historical context for what was happening during this time, what led to the rise of these clubs, and kind of what their activities were, and came up with some different categories and subsections, one of which was baseball clubs. A lot of the tickets I have were from baseball clubs from that time. Baseball was a fairly new sport, kind of coming to prominence late 19th century, so like 1870, 1880s, kind of started becoming a thing. By the turn of the century, baseball, had become more regulated, formalized. People adopted the same rules, but it was still kind of growing and, coming into its own. So some of the cards here are laid out front and back. You can see that, the fronts are very like type heavy, using some pretty cool old typefaces, to kind of catch the eyes people. And then on the back, I guess this is reversed, but or maybe just for me, but you can see there's some song lyrics, I guess from more popular songs from that era. And so I guess that's a little tidbit of advertisement of what to expect. Essentially these balls or dances that the clubs organize, often to raise funds for the activities. So yeah, there's some baseball club cards. There's pleasure clubs. All this kind of falls under the umbrella of social athletic clubs. That's kind of a catch-all term, but a lot of them refer to themselves in different ways. So this is like Shorty 4 Pleasure Club, who kind of those clubs emphasize, having fun part a little more than any athletic endeavors. Then we have some like ethnic clubs, who are more oriented towards supporting I guess, their kind of national culture, and but at the same time, engaging in sport activities like uh, baseball, for example, and kind of second generation of these groups, adopting American culture, more mainstream American culture, a little more. Um, so yes, more ethnic clubs. Um, One aspect of that, which are Turner Halls. Yeah, a couple of these following cards featured events at Turner Halls, which were started by German Turners, this group, and they kind of were adopted from many Germans who had come to Chicago to escape after the revolutions of 1848, which kind of the uprising lost, and so they, trying to escape Germany from political prosecution, um, and and yeah, so they started these clubs, and it's kind of more oriented towards gymnastics, which was an activity that they had adopted and were very keen on, and so they started these halls to organize and practice, and then the hall, is gymnastics kind of wasn't the most popular activity. They kind of changed it up and started hosting other activities such as dances for some of these social athletic clubs and things like that. Um, yeah, clubs and politics, another section, which focuses on the relationships that many of these clubs had with local politicians, ward bosses, aldermen, things like that, who would often sponsor the club. So here you see Charles E. Peace uh, given a reception dance by the Cavaliers Baseball Club at the Italian Hall. And there's, an advertisement for Charles E. Peace on the back, you know, Republican candidate for state central committeeman, 9th congressional district. So these clubs often had kind of a mutually beneficial relationship with politicians, and that politicians would pay for their overhead costs for their clubhouses, other costs they might have had maybe for uniforms, things like that. And in turn, the club supported this politician, um, helped, when came time to get to the ballot boxes, the club will get the word out, get people to the polls, and just, you know, trying to keep their guy in power or propel them into power. In turn, the politicians would, like I said, underwrite some of their expenses, and also, in some cases, offer protection from prosecution by law enforcement for any sort of petty crimes or more serious activities. You know, these clubs might be involved in, and so yeah, part of this came out of these clubs kind of having been already street organizations of some sort, even street gangs from various neighborhoods, um, and the politicians seeing an opportunity there, and kind of like making them official, through decree and licensing to become a social athletic club. So there's kind of a spectrum of SACs and how they're involved within politics versus more sporting activities and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting thing, like just kind of a structure and form of organization on a more neighborhood and local level, that tied in directly with the greater power structure, political power structure of Chicago during that era, especially in neighborhoods like Bridgeport, for example, which was kind of became political, uh, pocket of power so to speak. Richard J. Daley, for example, was a member and manager of the Hamburg Athletic Club, and there's many examples of politicians having formerly been members or involved in some way in these social athletic clubs, and these clubs provided opportunities politically and in other regards for its members to advance. So I guess that was another benefit to the members of supporting these politicians. They would see opportunities, patronage, jobs, things like that. And so yeah, kind of like getting a little scattershot on the description, but all the information's in the book here. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, I don't know, something I just really like kind of the type that's used here. You can see a little bit, this is kind of Old English black letter style fonts that were adopted by the gangs for the complicated cards. So you can see some of the influence there, in some regards. I've seen some cards of like the transition period here from like maybe this type of stuff to the more latter half of the 20th century, getting club cards that were kind of came in the form of actual tickets to dances. So like Ambros and Latin counts from Pilsen. I have somebody who grew up in that area, had a couple of those cards, and he sent them to me. And yeah, it was interesting. They were just tickets, to their dances, and it was a little more kind of modern type of stuff happening, but it's similar spirit, I think. And so yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening here. There's certainly also these clubs partook in the development of baseball, for example, in Chicago. There was like local leagues. Businesses and business owners also started fielded teams and started leagues for their employees. And this all, going back to like maybe how this started was, goes back to the title, Windy City Leisure. This is, the time like mid 19th century. There's a lot of development of like the system of labor in Chicago and how that was going to work. And, industry was kind of exploding in the city of Chicago, and Chicago became the biggest railroad hub of basically the country by the turn of the century. And a lot of manufacturing happening, a lot of production, refinement of raw materials into parts and goods to be shipped to the rest of the country. And during this time, there's kind of a back and forth pull between the business owners, the barons, and the laborers, working class people. There's definitely some radical elements during this time, mid 19th century, culminated in the Haymarket Square affair, and then kind of started backing off there after. But the Turner Halls were actually used to host gatherings of laborers, especially within these ethnic enclaves. And for the Turners, it was Germans, Bohemian, kind of Czech people, Sokol halls, I think is what theirs were called. And so yeah, this kind of this back and forth push and pull between laborers and kind of owners resulted in labor becoming more structured in Chicago. So, basically the idea of 8-hour workday was won by labor demonstrations. Then on the flip side, you had, like the railroad industry became huge, and um, that obviously is super dependent on time schedules and things like that. So shifts had to become much more regulated and exact in terms of timing. So this led to kind of the breakdown we have today of the 8 hours work, 8 hours leisure, and 8 hours rest in a 24-hour day. And so so this time for leisure became more defined in Chicago and society. Um, so with this happening, it's a major pastime of people back then in Chicago was, hitting up the taverns to socialize when they weren't working or sleeping, basically. Especially the labor class and people from that realm like to hit the taverns and have a beer and talk and enjoy. Um, but during this period, sports started becoming popular, and a lot of business owners like the idea of their employees engaging in sports more than them hanging out at taverns and saloons and whatnot. So for that reason, they some of the bigger business figures in Chicago during this time, Marshall Field, Potter Palmer, George Pullman, people like that started creating teams and leagues for their employees to join, because they saw sports as kind of more of a productive, you know, I don't know, just more productive in general, I guess, than hanging out at saloons and whatnot. So they encourage their employees to do this and kind of set up the structure for them to do so. Meanwhile, you know, kind of the working class set up their own uh, leagues and teams, amateur, kind of semi-pro, type of organizations, neighborhood by neighborhood, and so that's kind of how it started developing. Baseball was huge. You know, they Chicago kind of recently formalized and adopted the rules from the New York Baseball Associations. So like baseball started becoming more formalized and regulated. People playing by the same rules and things like that within Chicago, and teams started forming by the late 19th century, and leagues as well. So baseball had great appeal across economic lines, class lines, ethnic lines. It was a new sport, and it was kind of a homegrown sport, and so people I think like that. Also, pretty easy to play out in the fields and the lots, and so baseball was kind of this unifier, which is why I chose to focus on some of those clubs. Besides, having some of their tickets here, um, and yeah, kind of just developed from there. Between the company teams and leagues and the kind of independent teams and leagues, you know, uh, sporting culture grew um, within Chicago, and by the turn of the century, 1900, it was pretty big time. So, um, and one aspect of this that I think is important is that laborers they weren't making much. They weren't life was pretty tough for them, and baseball and other sports provide an opportunity for them to earn money outside of this wage labor system that existed. There was a lot of like betting, gambling stuff happening on underground level. Wagers that were placed between these teams, and the teams I think would also put up money and things like that. Um, when they played each other, and people of the labor class were able to earn a little extra money, and sometimes a lot more money than they would earn from their their day jobs, especially if they ended up playing for semi-pro or professional teams. Um, and so this incentive for them to like prove their physical prowess and earn some extra dough on the side. They found very appealing. And then meanwhile, the higher ups, the employers, the kind of the progressive movement, the Jane Addams types, saw sports as this more productive lifestyle in some sense or another, fitting their ideas of what is productive and how people should live in some way. So they had this common ground here, and I think for that reason, you know, sporting culture really bloomed in Chicago early 20th century. And so then, and then you see the rise of these social athletic clubs, on kind of a neighborhood level, local level, with their political sponsorships and whatnot, and so yeah, it kind of it goes from there. And of course, it's being Chicago, and the windy city with a lot of political wind being blown around. Politicians figure out how to plug into this system and benefit from it. And so, really like these teams, while having these aspects of providing leisure activities and being supported by the higher ups. I guess the political higher ups also spotted opportunity here and tried to get theirs out of the situation as well. So it's kind of multifaceted. And then there's also just the aspect of some of these clubs just essentially being formalized gangs, like street organizations. Finding, I include an example of that being the case here of some that I found in, there's a book called Gang, I think it's just called Gangs. Hold on, what's it called? The Gang, a study of 1,313 gangs in Chicago by the sociologist Frederick M. Thrasher. He published his book in like 1936. So he had a kind of a direct perspective and view, and he did like these case studies on social athletic clubs and said the majority of them were in fact sponsored by politicians and kind of like function in this way, because the ones that weren't sponsored by politicians didn't often have the money to like continue on paying for their clubhouses and covering their expenses, so they kind of like defaulted in that way, and then in turn became kind of the part of the Chicago political machine, which obviously evidenced in Richard J. Daley's participation in this system and his iron grip on Chicago politics for much of the 20th century. What better example is there than that? So yeah, and other kind of thuggish aspects of some of these social athletic clubs were kind of like these neighborhood enclaves, like areas around stockyards like Bridgeport and stuff. Like there was kind of these Irish clubs like Reagan's Colts, who were very keen on maintaining their neighborhood boundaries. Like looked at themselves as protectors of their neighborhoods and stuff, kind of in a way similar way to a lot of like Chicago street gangs from the 60s and 70s. These enclaves of neighborhoods, ethnic enclaves, kind of creating their own little worlds and not wanting other people in them. And this culminated in 1919 with Chicago race riots. After a boy was killed, a black boy was killed at a beach on the south side, while he was just swimming and accidentally floated into white what was considered to be a white beach, and guys started throwing rocks at him, and he ended up drowning. Um, and you know, this kind of just ended up exploding into these uh, standoffs. Um, along through the what was known as the Black Belt at that time. Sorry, I need a reference real quick just so I get the. So yeah, about 30 blocks along State Street, south of 22nd Street, which was adjacent to where a lot of these Irish communities around the stockyards, and there's a lot of tension being built during this time. The of people communities competing for jobs in the stockyards, and yeah, it kind of all just it blew up in 1919. And Reagan's Colts, this social athletic club, sponsored by Frank Reagan, Cook County Commissioner, kind of took you know the their own initiative to begin this standoff, and they just saw it as an opportunity to to get violent, basically. So that's kind of maybe the most extreme example of social athletic club kind of thug activity, but it was there. So but like I said, it's a spectrum. I think some of the clubs are just more along the lines of like a sports team, amateur sports team or whatnot. There were like neighborhood softball teams, 16-inch softball teams. There was games every night, of the week. Every neighborhood or block had their team. I think I had a quote in here somewhere saying as much. So it's just like what people did for fun back then was to go play 16-inch softball, and obviously still happens today. We have things like that. Things like that are happening in Chicago still, and but I don't think to the same level of like possibly organization, in some sense. Maybe just different forms. There's different leagues and things like that, but this kind of period, early 20th century, was when it was all getting developed. AAU, for example, or the YMCA. They were also kind of creating like organizations through the Chicago parks. So you know, yeah, so just local park districts and things like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, kind of covers a wide breadth, but I think, but yeah, there's a lot of interesting avenues that these social athletic clubs are involved with. And yeah, like I said earlier, it's kind of sponsored by this pamphlet I had, which you can see, this dude here, George F. Barrett, is featured prominently. And yeah, it basically lists, the members of the club, and then it has a bunch of advertisements for neighborhood, uh, auto repair shops, chiropractors, undertakers, books, stationery stores, things like that. You can even see here, there's, compliments of Jim and Harry, which I don't know who Jim and Harry are, but compliments of is interesting because that's, was a phrase used by, gangs on their compliment cards, later in the latter half of the 20th century. So, finding some roots for these slogans and, this printed ephemeral culture that exists in Chicago during this time. So, yeah, inspired by that one. I think I had another here. Where'd I go? Maybe not. But here's another card. Let's see, kind of oversized. On the back, like some of these lyrics here. Knee deep in daisies. Oh yeah, this one's interesting because it kind of like opens up into some advertisements. It's like a folder one. So yeah, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the construction of the book and stuff. Like I said, I was, inspired by this one, just kind of a standard like half letter fold. Um, you can see this is stapled in the side here. I got a question. All right, I'll put the construction on hold. Got a question from Eric Von Haynes, the excellent risograph printer from Flatlands Press. What's your favorite or strangest discovery? In general, Eric, or related to this specific subject? In general, favorite. I don't know. That's a toughie. Let me think about it for a second. I'll get back to that one. In reference to this club, to social athletic clubs. Man, that is tough. I don't know. I think one cool part about it is that each of the cards has the Union bug on it. You can kind of barely see it, but so it's like little symbols. If anybody's familiar with unions or has experience, I'm sure you'll be familiar with this phrase or this term, Union bug. It just shows that it was union printed by whatever local union organization it was. So it's cool. Like there's all these union printers throughout Chicago. This is pointed out to me actually by Oscar Areola, who I think I posted one of these cards on Instagram a while back, and he pointed that out. And then dude who was a union was like, oh yeah, Union bug, great, like Union strong. So yeah, and each of these there's tend to be a little Union bug to show that they were union printed. So and I believe that's still the case. In a lot of instances, like you can, if you use a union printer, they'll put the bug on it just to show your support of unions. But yeah, otherwise, I don't know if I have a favorite. I mean, I think I have. There's some cards I like, in particular. Yeah, I like the typeface of this one a lot. That kind of inspired the cover, typeface a little bit. Windy City Leisure. I don't know. It was kind of fun to learn some of these details, like digging into stuff like Oceana Roll, like when, or my Hula Hula Love, like why did this Hawaiian music become part of mass culture during this time? It's like kind of indirect thing, but like digging into that, it was we learned how during the right after the turn of the 20th century, Hawaii kind of became like known in American popular consciousness and became part of American popular culture. And so there was these like kind of hybrid songs that were like influenced by the idea of Hawaii. And I guess it's just in most Americans' minds, it'd be this kind of exotic place. So I think like, for example, this club Nippersink baseball club used these songs to evoke some sense of like tropical exoticism, but this was happening in December, so I think they tried to use it for advertising purposes. These lyrics like make people think warm, because we all know Chicago gets very cold in the winter. So yeah, and otherwise, I just think it was interesting how these clubs were connected in the political structure. It's like I didn't really know that was the case when I first started researching all this, but it's like entirely not surprising, and it kind of made the title Windy City Leisure, Windy City in reference to Chicago's blustery political rhetoric and grandstanding about, back in the day around the World's Fair about Chicago being the greatest city and whatnot. Just kind of became more appropriate. So I think like coming full circle that, um, that kind of, I don't know, something clicked there for me. Um, but yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the construction of this book, because it's been, kind of fun for me to learn more about how to put books together by hand. And so yeah, I get, the cover was printed with a letterpress printer by a printer called Is Press. We're located in Denver, Colorado, and were referred to me by Eric of Flatlands Press. They're like sister presses. They work together a lot, and they actually Pete of Is Press actually did the letterpress printing of Letter Chicago here, the Sir Charles publication that we released a while back. And did such a great job, and like love that effect, so decided to go with that again, just to add a little texture and just for the material value of it, since we for me books now are just like the object of the book. I feel like is becoming increasingly important in kind of the digital era. um, so to add that little extra value, actually no, I wish I had that little other book. Where'd that go? In any case, I had another small pamphlet. I found that don't know where it is. That was for Italian Pleasure Club, like 1920s. So like just a bunch of Italian dudes hanging out or whatever. But the cover material was linen, like linen paper. And so I was like, you know, I wonder if we could letterpress on linen paper. So I got some samples and stuff, different paper samples, and I asked Pete, if he thought it's possible, and he was a little unsure, but we decided to do an experiment, test it out, and and it worked. Like, so got some good results. It's kind of hard to see, but like you can see some of the linen texture coming through the W, which I thought was kind of cool. So yeah, I really like the cover stock of this, and then the color combo I thought ended up working pretty well. Then the interior was printed digitally actually by this printer called Smart Press, who's based in Minnesota, Chanhassen, Minnesota. I don't know how to say it, but just outside the Twin Cities. And yeah, the first time using them, and I thought the quality ended up being great. And that was also recommended by Eric. So I can thank him for a lot of this. But yeah, quality ended up being like, to me, similar to the offset quality, this book, as far as, color and sharpness and all that. I thought it turned out exceeded my expectations. So pretty happy with that. And it was nice to print, use a printer in the United States, obviously. So I'll probably, work with them in the future again. But so yeah, basically it was those two elements. I'll show you them in parts. One sec. So this is what I was provided by the the digital printer. I provided it folded, and then Pete provided me with these letterpress prints that were trimmed to size already, and yeah, basically I learned a little bit of bookbinding stuff here. I don't, didn't have a training in it, but I just started figuring it out here, similar to like how I figured out Letter Chicago, and finding, using examples and whatever, and yeah, so I take this sheet and I end up folding it. So kind of hard to see the detail here, but basically I created like a square back, sort of like perfect bound spine type of thing, because let's see, this is a bit thick, just to fold over directly and throw a staple through. It's not going to close very well. So I wanted to do this kind of like square back thing. And to do so, I had to use this thing called a bone folder, which is used in bookbinding, and score the paper along both sides so it would fold like evenly and neatly, instead of, like it basically creates a line, scored line fold, and then you can just fold along there and the fold will follow that score. And so then, yeah, I have this element. So then I'm then putting a staple through the middle along the sides here. This is my demo copy, so it's a little like offset or whatever. It's not totally straight, but you can kind of get the deal. And funnily enough, I don't actually use a stapler for this, which would be too easy. I use this owl, whatever, AWL, to poke, basically like poke a hole with hammer and awl, poke the holes for the staples. I guess I could have had one that was not quite done yet and showed you, but so yeah, I measure out, poke the holes for the staples, put the staples through, and then close them by hand here. So yeah, it's worked out, kind of labor intensive, but it feels good to make stuff with your hands. So and so yeah, then the final result's kind of like this square back linen paper cover with full color interior. I can't remember how many pages it was, like 60 pages, I think. Yeah, something like that. And yeah, that's pretty much how the construction works. So, I'm going to be doing that this weekend. I just got the interiors from the printer last week, so I haven't had time, a lot of time to get down to the dirty work of doing the binding. But yeah, I'm going to be doing that today. Got a rainy day, nothing else to do, so I'm going to got some orders to fill, so I'm going to get those cranked out today, tomorrow, as much as possible, and then start shipping everything on Monday, Tuesday, so people can get their books. Yeah. Any questions or comments, feel free to type it in the live chat thing. Thank you. Yeah, I actually, for this construction, I had another, I was inspired by this book, just like a poetry chat book type of thing. And they went a little further than me and did like this folding and stuff, but you can see how like they scored this. So you can see like how that was scored. But yeah, I was kind of inspired by that. But also out of just necessity for making, allowing the space for, this kind of thick folded interior to fit within, folded pamphlet. For some reason, I like how you didn't use a stapler. Yeah, I know. Wouldn't it just, got to take the hard route sometimes. What was the time frame of serial? Let's see. For the letterpress printing, I think once I got Pete the artwork, it took him just a couple days. You know, he had his hands full as well. He was doing oh, the time frame of the cards. The cards are like mostly like 1900, 1901 to like I think the later one I have is 1930. You know, so like 1900 and 1930s is mainly where I focused here. And you know, social athletic clubs continue to exist beyond then. You know, 40s, 50s, 60s. You know, kind of tailed out a little bit, and I think some of the clubs just folded, or you know, the culture changed, and you know, in Chicago in some way, and you know, maybe there were other like organizations for sports, and so the local clubs didn't need to be a thing so much. Um, but yeah, let's see, 1912, 1913 here. Um, yeah, 1921, 1912, 1914. Yeah, a lot from that time period, I guess. Then I also got, you know, some photos of original clubs. Women also participated in athletics, which is kind of a newer thing. But yeah, this club's from Cornell Square, which was kind of like a hot spot for sports clubs from that area, like the south side, near south side. Um, yeah, south side, back of the yards area. And it was kind of like opportunity for them to you know, sometimes travel and you know, do things beyond what was traditionally expected of them. Um, but yeah, yes, Shorty Four Pleasure Club. That's from 1905. 1904 was the other one, Crown Home. So mostly from South Side. Yeah, yeah, I would say the majority of these are from the South Side. Um, 31st Street, 18th Street. Let's see. This one's from like Humboldt area, North Avenue and Rockwell, between Rockwell and Maplewood. So that one's like more West Side, I guess. A couple like from Cicero, like um, but yeah, South Side mostly, and you know, like definitely a hot spot for these clubs. I think especially for the politically oriented ones. You know, like I think South and West Sides, you know, were kind of the hotbed for some of those types of clubs, and where a couple more of these are from. Yeah, like I have in here a few from different clubs called Colts, who are not Reagan's Colts, but they're from the same area. So we have the Barber Colts from 37th Street in Wentworth, or I guess that's where the hall was. They're having their party, but you know, I imagine they're probably from that neighborhood. You know, Taylor Colts here from, you know, having an event at 55th and Halstead. Uh, Sealy Colts, 48th. So yeah, but you know, I think they were you know, there's social athletic clubs throughout the city, and yeah, like Belmont Craigens, things like that. So yeah, it kind of varied. You know, I didn't get them, like they kind of came from different sources, so they weren't all like concentrated in one zone or whatever. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to remember now. There's like some phrase. Oh, Yeah, like the South Halsted Street District, an area sometimes called during that period the aristocracy of gangland. So like, these Irish neighborhoods where, kind of like seat of power type of situation, where obviously Daley came from and where the, Reagan's cults were from and all that. So, that's on the political level, I think like that's, you know, heavily concentrated area. Um, let's see, any more questions? Favorite or strangest discovery? Yeah, another interesting thing is they weren't like uniformly called social athletic clubs. Some of them were like Athletic and Benevolent Association, the White Owls, which I assume they're named after like maybe the cigars. Uh, um, yeah, some of them were just athletic associations, or so you had SAC, AA, ABA, yeah, just ACs, baseball clubs, the Luxembourger Brotherhood, uh, Lithuanian Social Club. So yeah, it's kind of an umbrella term, but you know, leads to a lot of different directions. The Masonic aspect of that of the White Owls, yeah, I think you might be right. I think some kind of like there were some fraternal organizations as well that probably had overlap. Um, you have quite an oeuvre of books now, all Chicago related. How does this one fit into and relate to the larger context of your other books? Okay, good question. Yeah, so this is our let's see, sixth publication. We had the two again compliment card books, the two house flyer books, and then Letters to Chicago. This is the second book that was kind of like more limited run, hand constructed, and the others were offset printed and kind of larger runs. And I think for this one, I didn't feel like I had like the material wasn't encyclopedic. It was more kind of a little more scattershot. So like I had stuff, but it wasn't like I wasn't gonna do like this big coffee table book of social athletic club history or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of like explore it a little bit in a book format. And so and kind of as part of that reason, and having done the Letter Chicago book prior, I wanted to give another shot. And like I said, being inspired by this Vertex Athletic Club publication, I kind of wanted to take a similar format as what might have been around during that time. So that's why the cover is obviously inspired by that design, and yeah, I tried to like adapt some of the aesthetics from the cards and this other pamphlet I had, um, to inform the design and things like that of this publication, uh, and try to kind of make it feel more of the era or something like that. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is kind of like more of a straight up history. You know, definitely Beyond Heaven in the 1920s. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a combination of actually, the compliment cards and Beyond Heaven. It's like these, these cards advertised dances, uh, social events like whatever receptions and dances and things like that. So it's like at these halls, which a lot of the Beyond Heaven house flyers, those parties in the 80s were hosted at local halls and stuff. And um, And so yeah, you're right. That's totally right. Thanks for making that connection for me. So yeah, this is kind of like, I guess, a combination of those two, like representing the club, but then in the card format, and then but except they're advertising, their social events, and they can make some good money at these from these dances, and also dancing in this way was becoming more of a social phenomenon in Chicago. People kind of breaking free of their maybe more uh, what would be the word for that? Like conservative heritage, where like if you dated, a girl of your, who if you were Italian, dated a girl who's Italian, you'd be expected to get married or something. And, the younger people could go to these dances and have a good time and dance with each other and whatever, carry on, and and uh, and not feel that weird pressure or whatever. So they're kind of on the forefront. They're living up to their name, social, athletic. That social aspect of dances and the receptions and stuff like that, creating a platform for the youth culture of that era, young adults of that era to socialize, get together. And then you have the athletic part where they have teams form, they play other teams locally, or I guess in bigger city tournaments, for often for money and wagers and stuff like that. Um, and So yeah, I guess it's a combo of those two a little bit. Um, but yeah, once again, just kind of like basing it in ephemera, meaning just like printed materials that weren't meant to be permanent exactly, but like that's just how things worked during that time before we got digital here. And so you know kind of cataloging this stuff, um, because paper doesn't last forever, it dissolves. And so for me, like uh, collections of ephemera, and it already looks good on paper, because it's printed on paper. It's made for like 2D, so you have like this, you know, heavy type basis for these cards, and so it translates really well to print, and to the book format on the page because it's already flat, um, and so and luckily there's some color to these cards and stuff too, so it's not just boring like white shades of white paper or whatever. Varies, and yeah, so it's just kind of like cataloging this stuff for posterity and to see it all in a group together, and just kind of also like try to offer some context, point some stuff out, but also allow people to investigate these materials themselves and maybe connect some of their own dots, draw some of their own conclusions. I don't want to be too prescriptive uh, about what is said about these things. I mean, like to some extent, you have to try to define things as you see it, based on the research you've done and the materials you've seen and what, sometimes who you talk to and things like that. Um, so you got to try in that regard, but I don't want to make it like too closed, closed ended. I want to keep it more open ended so people can like, reference this, for example, like if they're doing their own research, they can just use this as, primary sources, basically. Like, they don't have to hold the actual card. They can, they can see the content of the card here. So hopefully, plays into like a larger, discussion, conversation, that was happening during this time, and or I'm sorry, like conversation now or into the future of anybody who decides to, you know, broach a subject, and kind of form this, this chain bouncing back and forth of these things. Um, and yeah, so yeah, just kind of like, you know, going further back into Chicago's history. We growing up, if you're from Chicagoland area, like you, or Chicago proper, of course. you learn about, you know, the history of immigration. You know, you learn this earlier history, you know, and you hear about the melting pot, or no, it's not a melting pot anymore. It's like a some kind of salad or something like that. I don't know what metaphors they're using these days, um, but you know, we all kind of learn about this and how people kind of adapted to life in Chicago, and you know, for me, that narrative of like, you know, immigration to the United States, and how that continuously plays out historically and through today, um, is very interesting, and you know, I think uh, is something that runs through many of our historical and kind of like social histories, so to speak. And and so yeah, I mean, that's involved with this too. It's, you know, these clubs uh, kind of synthesize a culture, medley, yeah, medley of cultures. You know, there is kind of this back and forth that happens as well, whereas like there's a, you know, a mainstream dominant culture, um, who I think tends to want to assimilate people into their own culture, whereas like people coming in value the culture they're coming from. So, you know, for example, like first generations of whoever are coming in, like whether it's Irish, Italian, you know, German coming in, or if it's Lithuanian, Czech, you know, other peoples, like, you know, during that this period at least, and even through like the, you know, great migration happening from the south, you know, with many uh, you know, blacks from the South skipping Jim Crow and, you know, the boll weevil coming to Chicago. That's, you know, a huge part of Chicago's history and culture. And, you know, they started their own baseball teams, such as, let's see, we have, hold please, you know, the Chicago American Giants are kind of iconic team, founded by, what was his name? I should know this off the top of my head. Oh, Rube Foster. Yeah. So, you know, they played their own teams, did, you know, did barnstorming tours, stuff like that. And, and so, yeah, I mean, like, you know, baseball, like, was a unifier, and like people were able to like bring their own, you know, I don't know, their own take onto things. Like, there's like I said, there's a push and pull, like the mainstream dominant culture, kind of like this Anglo Protestant thing of the time. People who were in power had settled previously, and then the newcomers coming in and like, you know, kind of adapting things to their own ways, and then ended up being like this third thing almost. And you know, base definitely happened through baseball and, you know, sports culture in general in the early 20th century, where you have, uh, you know, to some degrees, this separation. You have the Turners, you know, the Turner culture, you know, gymnastic culture, stuff like that, and then you have this homegrown sport of baseball, which, you know, it's kind of a brand new thing, and you know, the first generations often are more, you know, orthodox and sticking to like, you know, their home culture, and then the second generation on kind of like adapts in different ways, you know, like, you know, so then baseball becomes more appealing to like the second generation. You know, so you have a lot of people coming in turn of century, then by like, you know, I guess 20s, like, you know, certain immigration restrictions are put in place. So there, it kind of like, you know, it becomes less first generation, and then second generation kind of like, I don't know, maybe sometimes they find, you know, like I said, that culture is stuffy. Like they don't want to have to be expected to marry the first girl that they meet of the same, you know, ethnicity they are, or something like that. So, um, And then yeah, through sporting culture, it's like you have these uh, these ethnic clubs, and then they kind of like go from you know fielding, like I said, like doing gymnastics type sports, soccer, and then they start fielding basketball and baseball teams, and but they bring their own kind of element to the mix in some way, and so yeah, kind of like that idea of this kind of third path forming between sort of the tension of the two, and and like, and of course in this day and age, it's like the Turner clubs, they're apparently related to German physical culture trend back then. Yeah, um, exactly, and that was like various gymnastic activities were sort of like how that manifested for the Turners. And there's still actually Turner halls in Chicago, a couple at least. I think they're starting to like dwindle, but you can see in like the edifices of buildings. Yeah, like yeah, exactly. Early health stuff is kind of like health oriented culture, but it was also involved with sort of like almost this radical. It's kind of like leftist political culture too. Like I said, it was like that culture was brought in. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm like referencing things proper. But yeah, like they were, it was a movement that began in early 19th century Germany proper, and after a failed revolution, they left Germany and ended up um, in Chicago and other places. And yeah, so in the mid and late 19th century, they allied with labor organizations to advocate for workers' rights against industrialists. So in like Turner and Sokol halls, and so like these halls would host these political rallies and speeches and stuff like that for kind of the more grassroots level labor movements and things like that, which obviously was a big thing during the mid 19th century. Um, and but by the time the turn of the century rolled around, they kind of became more like nationally oriented. So it was like more like German culture rather than the labor stuff kind of like died down a little bit after the Haymarket Affair in 1886. Really, these movements started getting cracked down on, and and so then you had the ethnic clubs who were trying to like promote this national culture, retain it, outside of the original country, um, and yeah. So sorry, I kind of lost that thread, but yeah, I mean, a lot of things tie in labor issues, which obviously is directly kind of related to leisure. It's like you work, you have your leisure time, you sleep. Um, Big with Bohemians, yeah, exactly. Like I think the Czech version of the Turners were the Sokols, Sokolls, and actually right around 1900 there were two like Bohemian slash Czech professional baseball players, and they were starting to form baseball teams. So it's just interesting to see how these these ethnic enclaves in Chicago from various neighborhoods kind of would adapt, but also retain, adapt to the mainstream culture, but then also retain, you know, elements of their own. And I guess that's the American story, right? It's like it was never one thing. It was always like a work in progress. And um, let's see another question. Any evidence of a Mexican aspect at this time? Oh man, I was hoping to find things about that. Like because yeah, definitely during the 1920s, a lot of like more Mexicans started coming in. Like my great grandfather came in to work on the railroads, and Yeah, I didn't find anything per se, although maybe I should just continue to dig deeper. But I think the when more people started immigrating from Mexico was like 1920s and beyond. Like 1920s some, but then a bit later, like I think that happened more. So it's kind of like more of the immigrants from I guess like southern Eastern Europe, Germany, Sweden, Lithuania, things like that. Um, and Yeah, so in this publication, I just try to like I said, just try to give an overview how these clubs worked, present some of their materials, and touch on some various like adjacent subjects that they kind of were related to them and whatnot, and also just a good excuse to kind of like dig into this history and make this publication. All right, well, looks like we're coming up on an hour and a half here. Yeah, any other questions or comments? Trying to see what else I got here for you. Oh, here we go. This is the other. You can see this is kind of like a, maybe you can't see, balloon paper. This little publication was both in Italian and English. OP. Oh, yeah. Like I was like talking about this earlier. The hat, it's like Pony League hat from probably the '70s. And it was either my uncles or my grandfathers. They were involved with like pony leagues in South Oak Park, where my mom's side of the family's from. Um, my grandfather, actually, my grandfather grew up on the west side in Garfield Park, and he was very into sports, sporting culture. He like I guess they used to host a lot of sports activities in Garfield Park. Assume sports still happen there, but like it's more like organized through the park districts in certain ways. They would have like speed skating and stuff on the pond and stuff like that. And so yeah, he grew up there and was very much immersed in this culture. Also, he went to Marshall High School, and he did boxing there and baseball and things like that. And I asked him if he like, ever came across social athletic clubs or anything like that, and he was just like, no, we just had a club in school, so it was like school affiliated athletic clubs. Um, and then he went on to play minor league baseball for a while, and um, figured out he wasn't going to make it for the Cardinals organization. Actually, figured out he wasn't going to make it to the majors, so then he ended up becoming an assistant principal at Jenner School in kind of like the near north side, Cabrini Green area. Um, so yeah, I just like where it's kind of old school hat and like the design and stuff like that, and reminds me grandfather. Intersection between leisure and labor in this country has changed so much. Thank you for sharing. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, it has. And obviously sports culture is still really big here, or in Chicago in general, and mostly a unifying force, I think, throughout the city. Besides maybe the Cubs Sox thing, but I think that's one thing is like somehow these sports teams represent a city in a way, and I think a way that's also becomes like emotional. It's like where you're from, like they represent. Even if you don't care about sports that much, or if you don't play that sport, you can still like you still become like way too emotionally invested in sports, or you can become too emotionally invested in sports teams, and like um yeah, obviously it's still around, except it's a lot more I don't know, corporatized or whatever, like billionaire owners and making a lot of money, so it's kind of another thing. But yeah, so all right, people, I think that's all I got for you today. I'm gonna get to binding the rest of these books here, so I can mail them out if anybody ordered one. You know, this stuff makes the most boring sport on earth, baseball, fascinating. Hey man, some people like baseball. I don't know. I find it calming. I like putting it on in the background. It's the perfect radio sport, you know, if you ask me. But you know, but yeah, definitely has an interesting history. Baseball does, and um, yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up. All right, thanks everybody for joining. And yeah, I'm gonna see, maybe I can save this or something. People can watch it later if they want to. I don't know. All right, man. All right, people. Take care. Enjoy your weekend, and thanks again.